Sometimes a game is just so good that it seems impossible to top. A game that has been released to critical acclaim, or maybe you just think it's really good. It's amazing. The game is already among the best of the best, amidst the ranks of some of your favorite games ever. You think, this game is so incredibly awesome, what could they possibly do in the sequel to make this better? There is no way they can top what they've already done. Then the sequel does release, and oh my god, they managed to pull it off. I'm talking about a very specific type of game here that's hard to succinctly define in a YouTube title. I'm not just talking about good sequels. I'm talking about sequels to already amazing games that are so good they make the original game look bad. There are a few games I can think of that fit this description. Games that somehow make their predecessor look like dookie in comparison, even though the original game was once seen as this incredible piece of media that I thought would be impossible to surpass. My first example of this is the sequel to the 2015 Metroidvania Ori and the Blind Forest. Ori and the Blind Forest was a beautiful game. It received lots of praise from players and critics at the time because of its touching story, beautiful world, style, and music. Not to mention the non-linear Metroidvania exploration that's enhanced throughout the game as you unlock new abilities. It received high praise from critics. It won all of these awards, and I didn't even know the BAFTA Awards did video games. But most importantly, the players loved it. The game has a 95% positive rating over 42,000 reviews, and the definitive edition also has a 95% positive rating over 51,000 reviews. It has a different sort of style from most other Metroidvanias. The game keeps the combat simple and mainly focuses on exploration and movement, while a lot of other Metroidvanias like to focus on difficulty and Souls-like gameplay. Ori and the Blind Forest had this much more light-hearted feel to it. The bright palette and the lack of Souls-like gameplay make the game sort of akin to a Pixar movie. It just has those vibes. Instead of boss fights, the 3 main dungeons end with an epic escape sequence where you have to outrun something. They're really fun, high-octane set pieces, and they look beautiful too. The game also has that infamous beginning scene that seems to make everyone cry. These aspects of the game made it stand out from a genre that nowadays may be getting a little bit oversaturated. Just like everybody else, I played through the game and I loved it. I even 100%ed my save file. Not all of the achievements, but I explored 100% of the map and collected all the items and upgrades, etc. I loved this game, and I was super excited for the sequel. The first game was already amongst the ranks of my favorite games ever. How could they possibly make it better? If they just did more of the same thing, I probably would have been happy. Ori and the Will of the Wisps was released on the 11th of March 2020, exactly 5 years after its predecessor. I played this on release, and 3 days later I had 100%ed this save file as well. They had done it. Improved greatly upon what I thought was already a masterpiece. They did not just do the same thing again. They ambitiously expanded upon all of the elements that were lacking in the original game, even though nobody was really complaining about these elements in the first place. One of the biggest improvements in this game was the combat overhaul. Instead of mashing X to kill every enemy like in the first game, now you have an array of weapons that you can choose from and upgrade. You can play however you want. The combat is fun and actually requires some thought now, and while the lackluster combat in the first game wasn't an issue for me at the time, being able to actually fight things is way more fun now. They also added a whole town of little Grimblies with side quests that you can do to rebuild their village and unlock new paths and items for yourself. There's a currency now, and there's also a charm system where you can switch out different buffs on the fly. Sound familiar? There are also speedrun challenges, boss fights, and a lot of new collectible items. In every way that we didn't know we needed, this game improved upon itself. It improved so much that now if I were to go back and play the original game, I probably wouldn't be able to see it as the masterpiece that I once did. Now that I know what's possible for them to create within the bounds of this format, I wouldn't be able to go back to the original. The developers did their job too well. 9 days later, March 20th, 2020, Doom Eternal releases. The same exact thing happened, just over a week after Ori released. That was a good month for gaming. Doom 2016 was a fucking incredible game. It had insanely fast-paced, non-stop ripping and tearing. It was widely beloved. Not only did it revitalize the Doom series, but it was also a breath of fresh air in the shooter genre as a whole. Obviously not all games are like this, but the vast majority seem to be running down a hallway, hiding behind cover, shooting, hiding behind cover, shooting. They can be kind of slow and they can be kind of boring. I honestly don't play too many FPS games in general. I don't find them that innovative or fun. So many people loved Doom 2016 because you're all over the place, like boom, bang, kapoosh, slam, what? The over-the-top, rapid, gory action set this game apart and just made it fun. Anecdotally, I had always heard online that Doom 2016 is the best shooter of all time because you're always going boom, bang, kapoosh, slam, what? And everybody was right. I played the game and got to the credits. Then I played it again, and again, and again, and again. This was my favorite shooter of all time. I liked turning my brain off and just shooting my way through hordes of demons. So once Doom Eternal released, I was obviously excited to play it. I was so hyped for this game, and it blew everything that Doom 2016 did out of the water. People thought the original game was crazy and fast-paced. Oh my, just wait until they see the double dash into the swing on the pipe, into the meat hook, into the flame belch, into the 720 pop shove it tail grab. Just like Ori and the Will of the Wisps did. This game fixed issues that I didn't even realize needed fixing, because the first game was so good already. Now that I'm looking back in hindsight, I can notice a couple of these issues. For how great the first game is, all of the levels look the same. They're all in some facility on Mars, which is pretty boring. And you never have to worry about ammo, so by the end of the game, you would just use the siege mode on the Gauss cannon to destroy all of the bosses. Those would be my two biggest flaws with the original game, although it's still incredible. Doom Eternal fixed both of these issues, and then also multiplied all of the fun bits by 10 to make them even more funner. Now you have limited ammo in all the guns, and each enemy is weak to specific weapons, so you're constantly switching guns to spend your ammo wisely. Not as harsh as a Resident Evil game, obviously, but your ammo is something to be highly aware of now in this game. Every level also looks vastly different from each other, so you're not just on a red planet for the whole game. The developers somehow made the game even faster paced, despite the fact the original was already considered faster than most other games. There are so many new abilities. Double dash, blood punch, ice grenade, flame belch, meat hook, runes, skill trees, weapon masteries, the crucible, 720 pop shove it tail grab. This game is fast. And I had the same experience with this game as I did with the first. I played it again and again. Now, going back and playing Doom 2016, I'm about to say something crazy. It feels slow. Yeah. The game that once felt incredibly speedy and awesome now feels like I'm a little slug climbing up a tree, and I'm a slug that doesn't have the ability to dash twice in midair. And because the few noticeable flaws in this game were fixed in the sequel, they're much more pronounced if you play Doom 2016 after playing Eternal. Doom Eternal is an amazing sequel that made the amazing prequel look slow and boring in comparison. I haven't played the DLCs yet. I heard mixed reviews, but I'll definitely get around to them eventually. With both the Ori and Doom sequels coming out 9 days apart, they both posed similar issues to me at the time of release. I had rated both of their predecessors a 5 out of 5, but then their respective sequels come out and they are so much better than the first. What do? Do I give these new games a 5 out of 5 and put them in the same category as the inferior predecessor? That doesn't seem fair. Or do I move the predecessors down to a 4 or a 4.5 now that they've been surpassed? This also doesn't seem fair, because at the time of release, these original games were a 5 out of 5 to me, and they deserve praise for that. The quality of these sequels poked a hole in my rating system for games. And yeah, I know there are more important things than assigning an arbitrary number to a game, okay? It's not important at all, but I like doing it. I never really found a good solution to this problem that felt right to me. But that's a whole nother issue, and discussing game ratings and numbers is a massive topic for another video. There is just too much to say about it, so I'll save that for another day. Let's talk about Portal 2 instead. My experience with Portal 2 is the opposite of what I talked about with Ori and Doom. By that, I don't mean it's a bad sequel, it's not. I mean that I played the sequel before I played the first game. Portal 2 is one of the best puzzle games of all time. That is not up for debate. I mean, everyone knows it. It just does everything right. I'm not sure what else there is to say. The campaign is amazing and improves on the first game in about every way. There's also a co-op mode which is extraordinarily fun as well. I played the co-op mode before the campaign when I was a kid and my friends would come over to my house or I would go over to theirs. Actually, that just reminded me that Portal 2 was the very first game I got on Steam. For my birthday one year, I got this physical copy of the game, and I remember being confused that I had to make a Steam account to play the game. Now, I know that people loved the first Portal. Just from what I've heard in my life, people loved the first Portal as much as they now love Portal 2. It was incredibly influential. But 3 years after playing the sequel, I played the original, and it was good, but I remember being kind of disappointed. I didn't see what everyone else saw because I had played the much better sequel first. So yeah, it's my fault for playing them out of order. I'm definitely not blaming the game. In my experience, I had the ability to constantly compare the game to its sequel, so I ended up thinking that this first entry in the series was kind of dull, boring, and short, which is unfair, I know. I think I gave the game 3 stars? But anyway, to link this back to the title of the video, Portal 2 is a masterpiece of a game and a masterpiece of a sequel. It was so top-notch that when I played the prior entry in the series, it was nowhere near as good, now that I had the power to compare the two games. There are many types of sequels, and I've only touched on one very specific type in this video. These 3 games that I mentioned are very special cases. I'm not sure if I've played any other sequels that really fit this exact description. Most of the time, a game's sequel doesn't supremely surpass what came before. Lots of sequels are kind of just on par with the original, or slightly worse because they don't really add anything new. These sequels just do the same thing that they already did in the first game. So like, yeah, it's still enjoyable, but as the player you want them to elevate what they've already built in the original. In order to have a fresh experience that feels as thrilling as it did when you played the first game, the game's creators have to innovate and just do something new. A few examples of sequels that I've enjoyed, but not as much as the original, are Hotline Miami 2, Coffee Talk 2, We Love Katamari, and Wolfenstein 2. These games all had prequels that were astounding, so they had a high bar set for themselves. And the sequels were all great and really enjoyable, but don't quite push the limits far enough to be better than the original game. Some sequels take a different direction from the original game, such as Zelda 2, Mario 2, or Resident Evil 5. Some series really only found their footing in the second game, such as Sonic 2 or Mega Man 2. These sequels set the standard and the formula for every entry in the series afterwards to follow. And then there are also sequels that are just purely bad. Gaming sequels are hard. To be able to top something that is already incredible and loved by fans is no easy task. A lot of the time they can be kind of meh. So when a sequel releases that exceeds all expectations and outshines the original, it's nothing short of a masterpiece. If you liked hearing me talk about sequels and want to hear me talk some more about video games in the future, then consider subscribing. Thank you everyone for over 5,000 subs, and thank you for watching.